I never thought I would live long enough to say these words out loud. And even now, at 87 years old, my hands tremble as I remember the moment I finally decided to tell my wife the truth. A truth I had buried for 43 years beneath layers of silence, routine, and carefully rehearsed smiles. Because when you live that long with a lie, it doesn't just sit in your mind. It becomes part of your breathing, part of the way you look at someone you love, and part of the man you pretend to be every single day. And yet, no matter how deep you bury it, the truth has a way of aging with you, growing heavier with each passing year, until one day it becomes impossible to carry any longer. When I married Margaret, I was 44 years old. Already a man shaped by loss, regret, and choices I never fully explained to anyone, not even myself, and she was 39, gentle, intelligent, and patient in a way that made you feel safe just sitting beside her, and from the outside, our life looked simple and respectable. A modest house, Sunday routines, shared meals, quiet laughter. But what she never knew, what no one ever knew, was that our marriage began with a lie so carefully hidden that even I started to believe it no longer mattered. Before Margaret, there was another woman, Eleanor, a name I stopped saying out loud decades ago. Not because I didn't remember her, but because remembering her reminded me of who I had been before I chose the easier path, before fear made my decisions for me, and before I learned how devastating silence could be. And Eleanor wasn't just a passing romance, she was my first great love, the kind that rearranges your future without asking permission, the kind that makes promises feel permanent. And when she told me she was pregnant, I didn't doubt her for a second, because I knew deep down that child was mine. But fear has a loud voice when you're young, and mine told me I wasn't ready, that I would fail, that my life would end before it even began. And instead of standing beside Eleanor, instead of being the man I should have been, I left, not dramatically, not with a slammed door or angry words, but quietly, cowardly, convincing myself that disappearing was better than staying and ruining everything. And I told myself lies that night, that she'd be better off, that someone else would step in, that time would erase my responsibility. Lies that followed me into every chapter of my life. Years later, when I met Margaret, I told her I'd never been married, that I had no children, that my past was simple. And she believed me because I spoke calmly and confidently, and because she trusted the man standing in front of her. And for a while, I almost believed my own story, because life has a way of rewarding silence if you stay quiet long enough. And as years turned into decades, the lie settled into our marriage like furniture, that no one questions anymore. Margaret and I never had children, not by choice at first, but later by acceptance. And she took that reality with grace, never blaming me, never questioning fate, never suspecting that somewhere out there was a son or daughter who shared my blood, my eyes, my mistakes, and every birthday that passed, every Christmas morning, every empty chair at the table carved a deeper groove of guilt into my chest. But I said nothing, because once a lie survives 10 years, then 20, then 30, it starts to feel untouchable. It wasn't until my body began failing me that the truth started pressing harder, because age does something strange to time. It makes the future feel small and the past feel unbearably large. And as my nights grew quieter and my sleep lighter, memories I had successfully avoided began visiting me without invitation. And I started wondering what kind of man leaves this world without cleaning up the mess he made. What kind of love survives a lifetime built on silence? And what kind of forgiveness exists when the truth comes so late? The moment I decided to tell Margaret didn't come during an argument or a dramatic confession. It came on an ordinary evening, as she sat beside me knitting quietly, her hair fully silver now, her hands slower than they once were, and I realized with terrifying clarity that if I didn't tell her now, I never would, and that she deserved the truth not because it would change anything, but because she had earned it through 43 years of loyalty, she offered without knowing the full story. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It sounded smaller, weaker, like a man asking permission to exist, and I told her everything. Not quickly, not dramatically, but carefully, piece by piece, from Eleanor to the pregnancy to the choice I ran from. And as I spoke, I watched Margaret's face change in ways I will never forget. Not anger at first, not sadness, but shock, the kind that freezes time. The kind that makes you realize the person you've loved for decades is suddenly a stranger standing in familiar clothes. She didn't interrupt me. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry right away. And that silence was heavier than any reaction could have been, because when someone is processing 43 years of deception, words feel inadequate. And when I finished, when the truth finally sat between us like an object too large to ignore, I waited for her to say something that would define the rest of my life. What she said instead was quiet and devastatingly simple. "I wish you had trusted me enough to tell me sooner." And in that moment, I understood something I had avoided my entire life. That the lie wasn't just about the past. It was about my belief that the people who loved me couldn't handle the truth. And that realization hurt more than any punishment I had imagined. Margaret didn't leave me. She didn't forgive me immediately either. And that space between those two outcomes became the hardest place I have ever lived. Because forgiveness that comes slowly forces you to sit with your choices. And in the weeks that followed, we talked more honestly than we ever had before. About fear. About regret. About the way love changes when it's tested by truth. And about the child I abandoned, who by now was likely in their 40s, living a life I would never fully know. At 87, I learned that the truth doesn't arrive to set you free the way stories promise. It arrives to hold you accountable, to remind you that love isn't proven by comfort, but by honesty, and that some confessions don't fix the past. They simply stop it from poisoning the future. And while I can never undo what I did to Eleanor, or reclaim the years I lost with my child, I can at least leave this world knowing that the woman who shared my life knows who I truly was, flawed, fearful, and finally honest. And if there is one thing I want anyone listening to understand, it's this. Lies don't disappear with time. They age with you, they grow heavier, and they wait patiently for the moment you're too tired to carry them anymore. And when that moment comes, the truth will ask for its place, not loudly, not cruelly, but firmly, because it always does.